and I are going to handle this. Poomkar is going to kind of jump in here and there and help us out, and we'll get rocking. Slide. You got control, Poomkar, not me. There we go. If you're not familiar with MakerDAO, decentralized governance, the granddaddy of DeFi, they kind of kicked it all off. They have a full decentralized governance model, and they manage the generation of DAI, the soft peg stablecoin, and they have their own embedded governance mechanism within the entire Maker protocol. Slide. They said MakerDAO pretty much kicked off DeFi. These are the guys who got the whole thing rolling and really brought it out. They started with $, which was a different kind of weird thing, but they kind of worked its way in slowly. It took 4 years to get MakerDAO off the ground. And with DAI and all of their vaults, it's got the entire thing put together for the Maker market, which is why it's called MakerDAO. Slide. All right, so basically what is a Maker Vault and what is it all about? Well, it's frictionless borrowing. It's truly permissionless and bankless. You get to walk on there, deposit your own assets into the vaults, take out DAI, which is their soft peg stablecoin, no credit scores, no gatekeepers, all done on chain, and the collateral is backed by your assets. It's a 150% requirement. MakerDAO recommends in their documents that you keep your collateral closer to 300% so you don't get wrecked or liquidated, as we're seeing right now across a lot of different DeFi protocols. Everybody's getting liquidated. So just a quick example, if you wanted to have $9,000 with ETH to borrow $3,000 worth of DAI to be very safe, or degen it out and get $4,500 worth of DAI and pray your collateral only goes up. If the value of your collateral does drop, the vault will liquidate you. Slide. There we go. So MakerDAO community, people who come together and actually hold the MKR token are the ones who are handling the governance and the community of the entire DAO. The DAO teams, individuals, those who are put together to actually take on the DAO and handle everything. And then there's external actors, which is kind of really important to understand as we go forward. The keepers, these guys are usually bots. They're elected or brought in to handle all the liquidations that happen, which is done through auctions. So these keepers sit around and they keep an eye on vaults, and as the collateral levels start to get low, they begin to bring in the auctioning mechanism to auction off the collateral to make sure that the entire MakerDAO system stays solvent. Price oracles. This is a really big one. When you're dealing with decentralized DeFi protocol, especially when it comes to liquidation, where you're getting your price inputs matters. So just say, for example, they only used one single oracle. If the price were to drop from ETH, so should be $1,100 right now, if it was reading at 980, it might liquidate a ton of vaults that shouldn't. So Maker does a full election to make sure they have the right oracles and multiple oracle streams coming in at one time to ensure that nothing in the vaults is ever liquidated incorrectly. The feed is really important, how the information comes in. When you're dealing with smart contracts, the information going into that contract is critical here. And then there's the global settlers, which are the emergency oracles. These guys are here to help as a last line of defense in case there's an attack on the governance or on the price systems. They can freeze everything in the system. They can change how prices are inputted, and they can mitigate large losses if people start to do a bank run or if anything goes absolutely crazy inside of MakerDAO and can pause or emergency shut down the system. Slide.
Oh, wait, actually, Joe, if you wanted to talk about the recent liquidation and how it impacts the keepers, that would be really great.
Yeah, sure. So the keepers get to go ahead and do the liquidation auctions. So if we'll say that, I'll see the big one everybody's worried about right now, we'll say Celsius. Celsius is carrying a massive rat Bitcoin vault right now, MakerDAO, with a huge DAI loan. I think 13,000 Bitcoins are locked up in there. It's a really large one. So if that were to get liquidated, the keepers would go ahead and start an auction selling off all that rat Bitcoin, trying to get all the DAI back into the system so they don't have any kind of loss at the whole point. The scary part is if you have massive liquidations like that, the whole market price can tank. And the theoretical scary part is that the price would go so low that the sales that would happen wouldn't cover the DAI inside. But on the plus side, if you are being liquidated and these keepers can do the auction and they can get all the DAI back that Maker is owed, and they can also get back extra, you are paid back the extra. So if you're liquidated, you actually get to get some of your collateral back if the auction's in your favor. So these bots can actually make some money off of it. So they're usually bots, sometimes they're individual actors, but when these auctions go through, if there's extra money in there, there's some arbitrage opportunities, the keepers are to keep the discount. So it's kind of an interesting model for people to watch these, and they can look at what's going on and hopefully make a couple bucks off liquidating people. So that's kind of the whole keeper idea. That cover your question, themes, or your idea?
For sure. And then there's also other external actors, including you and Punkar. Did you want to discuss shortly your meta governance and how that applies?
Yeah, so Punkar and I recently just talked to MakerDAO, and we're now part of as a governance house. We are now delegates, so people who hold large stakes of Maker can delegate their voting power to us to go through and make votes for different protocols. And we'll go through and make sure that we are doing what's in best case for that protocol and be writing opinions. And Punkar, you want to jump in here and explain some more about governance house? That'd be awesome.
Yeah, sounds good. Yeah, so it's basically one of the type of delegation within their governance. Uh, some DAOs decide to delegate all the votes, so there is almost like you need to be a you know recognized delegate or steward or however it's called to be able to vote. But in case of Maker, uh, you don't need to, but like there are like let's say preferred option like or professional delegates which are getting even paid for being there and like deciding on behalf of Maker MKR holders, uh, and and justifying also their decision. So the logic behind is that there is so much happening that not every individual token holder can like know about everything and really go deep into the topics and decide on behalf of basically their own token, like what is the best for Maker. So they have created this kind of recognized delegate platform where like we as a governance house, which is independent governance entity, can be there on behalf of those token holders. We can go deeper into Maker. We can, study the product, the strategy, have discussions with all the core units, know where Maker is heading, and trying to help navigate them through. So that's what Joe, I, and few others will be doing now. Uh, we just got set up over the weekend, so there is a video if anyone wants, like where we are explaining who we are and what is the main goal of ours. It's really to push Maker forward, like to be able to reach their goals with real world assets and other initiatives. And we believe that we have that knowledge, that we will get also that support from MKR token holders to help execute some of those votes and some of those projects. And on top of it, and that's where kind of Bankless Consulting comes in place, is uh, we might see some things where Bankless Consulting can really help Maker, where maybe this is like governance topic. So let's say about their governance, we might see that there are some gaps, and maybe we can help to fill those gaps or like restructure the governance in the way that it will be more efficient. And that's also another kind of goal of ours, to identify where they can be more efficient, where Bankless Consulting and others can help Maker to become a better DeFi protocol. Let me pause here if there are any questions regarding that.
Thank you for the explanation, Punkar.
Of course. Joe, do you want to add something to it?
No, you covered it well, man. We're just here to help and here to getting people involved in voting more.
Yeah, so far we have 0 MKR delegated to us, but that's because the contract got set up like a few hours ago.
Did you want to talk about the MKR governance token, Joe?
Sure. So MKR is the governance token of MakerDAO. You get to vote on all the different, you make proposals like any other governance token. So make proposals, vote on snapshots, and go ahead and post to the forum. to go through and vote on how the protocol handles it, what kind of parameters they're using. So from Oracle feeds for prices, triggering shutdowns, making maker improvements performance protocols, or to go out and add new risk types or asset types or risk parameters. It's really important when the community looks at what kind of collateral to allow in the vaults. If you started letting people lock up all kinds of crazy tokens, you're going to have wild price fluctuations, mass liquidations that would actually destabilize the protocol. So vetting and ensuring that only really high quality assets end up in these vaults is really important. And right now it's only ERC20 tokens. We're not allowing anything else in the vaults at this time based on how the smart contracts are designed. MKR holders also get a little bit of dividend from holding their token. So essentially profits from the protocol in forms of fees when loans are taken out, as well as repaid or liquidated, go to the MKR holders themselves by buying back tokens. So the price eventually does go up based on how long the protocol has been active for and what kind of fees it generates. So it works a couple different ways to make sure that people who are holding it are getting paid a little bit and incentivizing folks to be active in governance and ensuring the risks and the parameters of the protocol are always safe and active. Slide. And Phoenix, I'll pass it off to you. You can take us down governance highway and show us what's going on.
Yeah, that's me. Please tell me if it's too loud where I'm at. So MakerDAO governance is, as Joe said, governed by the Maker token, gives you the eligibility to vote. It's divided into two main parts, on-chain and off-chain, as well as their governance framework can be broken down into two major components, which I'll describe further on. So there's governance proposals, which are more of a symbolic vote used to pull community sentiment, and executive votes, which are used to ratify the risk parameters and the results and state changes inside the DAO credit system and occur in every quarter. Next slide, please. So off-chain governance is how you would imagine it. It really just supports, what I find interesting about MakerDAO is that it uses off-chain governance as a supporter of on-chain governance by providing a process for gathering feedback for proposing on-chain votes and making decisions that don't require on-chain voting. So things that we would regularly, anticipate, things like participating in the forums and the public governance calls. And within the forums, there's these things called forum signal threads. And within that, it's there to particularly measure consensus around the issue and moving the issue to on-chain governance polls. So what this could also be seen as a start after the ideation phase within the governance process. And so once forum signals have received enough and reasonable community discussion, the creator of the signal thread will then decide whether to refine the signal thread and post a new one, or request that the governance facilitator push it to an on-chain governance poll. What I found really interesting about that is that it goes, before it actually moves to votes, it goes through somebody else who then validates whether or not there has been enough discussion or quorum to move it on to an official proposal. And so if the governance facilitator agrees that the issue outlined in the signal thread is ready to go on-chain, then the governance facilitator will create an on-chain governance pool in the form of the specified by the community consensus created in the signal thread. Any questions in regards to off-chain governance voting at Maker?
Yeah, just one question. Do you have any idea how many decisions they put through with this kind of fairly complicated mechanism? I mean, the mechanism seems to be very robust, but I don't know how fast they could be, like, by making decisions.
Yeah, well, some of the forum signals actually last for a couple of weeks. There's no really set time. From what I don't know if Levi's still here or if anybody can add to this, is that from what I've seen, there is no specific limitation on the length of time for this. What it is really dependent on is whether or not there has been a reasonable number of discussions from community members in order for this to move forward. So from what I've read, it's really the governance facilitator who is selected by the community to really decide whether or not it could push forward to an on-chain governance pool.
Okay. Thanks.
So it's like more serious than our Discord forum.
Yeah.
How we have a forum. Like if there was I feel like an example of this would be like in our forum to meet to meet a quorum for it to move to grants committee. Can I get a link to the slides? Yes, the slides will be shared within our governance base camp area. Any other questions on off-chain governance at Maker? Nope. Okay, next slide, please.
Maybe one thing what I want to mention just overall regarding those proposals. Maker is actually, and that's what I have already been able to capture from people working at Maker. Maker is actually struggling with too many proposals. The thing is they are really big and really well known in the ecosystem, and like everyone would like to help. Everyone would like to kind of propose cooperation with their own platform. And this is hard to tackle because everything what is happening on MakerDAO needs to go through like really rigorous like security review. It needs to be aligned with their kind of technology stack, but also the strategy. And first and foremost, it needs to be secure. So basically the dev team there like needs to go through every single proposal and needs to kind of put opinion on that and some research, and it takes so much time. So that's something what those more it's like famous people are struggling with paparazzi and like other too much publicity, and they need to deal with it. Maker has the same thing, like they are too much publicity, they need to go through too many things, and this is something they are trying to deal with through like different levels of governance, but still it's hard to like consume all these things and do their job as well. Themes, please continue. I just wanted to give a little bit of context.
No, I love the context. Thank you so much. But I was also really curious because we had this conversation this morning as well, is that whether or not you have found from reading the proposals, from reading the proposals, sorry about that, I'm leaving somewhere. From reading the proposals, whether or not there has been duplications of proposals already submitted. Have you seen that, Pankar?
There are definitely duplications, but they do have pretty good management on the forum. Means like there are like people who are managing the forum, so they can see it, so they can identify those. So they've been pretty good in managing those. But there can be very similar proposals, but for very different platforms, and then it's different proposals. So it depends. So there will be duplications in the way like there might be similar proposals, like we want to onboard DAI or put DAI on Aave or something like that, and there will be put DAI on another DeFi protocol. So it will be similar or look like, however, it will be different because we are exploring different DeFi protocol which is interacting with it.
Thank you. And so now we can move on to the on-chain governance. And what the first one will be governance polls. And so governance polls are used to measure the sentiment of MKR voters. And the common period of these polls are between 3 to 7 days, which is actually very important because we know that we are a global community, even within Maker is a global community. So providing people enough time frame to vote and also to discuss is really, really important. And so these polls are used to determine governance and DAO process outside the technical layer of the Maker protocol, form consensus on important community goals and targets, measure sentiment on potential executive vote proposals, ratify governance proposals originating from the MakerDAO forum signal thread, of which we mentioned, determine which values certain system parameters should be set to before those values are then confirmed in an executive vote, and ratify risk parameters for a new collateral type as presented by risk teams. What I actually found interesting though too is that these governance polls have a consistent schedule. And so they are scheduled to go live on a weekly basis every Monday at 12 p.m. Eastern time. So I found that really interesting because then people could always check to see like what new polls are up, which could probably increase engagement. I'm not sure if it leads to increased engagement in this case, but I thought that was a really interesting directive. Next slide. Any questions on governance polls? I mean, we have them here at Bankless as well. But if anybody wanted any clarity on anything.
No, just a reiteration of the last slide on the end of it there, just being like how critical it is for a protocol like Maker to have risk parameters in place. And when people put these collateral types to a vote to make sure that a risk team actually goes through and ensures the token has solvency, the diluted supply isn't crazy, the smart contract doesn't have any, malicious code in it. It's hard to have a protocol like Maker quickly do an audit of a token that wants to be part of the vault. So the risk team is really essential over at Maker to make sure this is all safe and secure from a token and chains perspective.
Agreed. So their governance proposal process I also found really interesting and intentional. I would be curious to see how effective it really is in terms of engagement. But before a proposal really becomes active, it goes through what I've just described before is like proposal polling. And so that's really just to, again, establish a rough consensus of community sentiment before any executive votes are cast. So this really helps to ensure the governance decisions are considered thoughtfully and reach consensus prior to the voting process itself. And then it goes into active proposals, which will allow Maker token holders to cast approval votes for the proposals that they want to elect as active proposals. And then the Ethereum address that has the highest number of approval votes is elected as the active proposal. Next slide. And then there are the executive votes. So the executive votes are to execute technical changes to the Maker protocol. And when active, each executive vote proposed sets of changes being made by the Maker protocol smart contracts. Unlike any other types of votes, executive votes are used as a continuous approval voting model, which I will describe in the next slide. And they're primarily used to either add or as well as add or remove collateral types, add or remove vault types, adjust global system parameters, adjust vault specific parameters, and replace modular smart contracts. And so Joe is our DeFi expert in this. Do you want to describe the importance of why executive voting within these types of collateral votes or vault types are really important, especially in terms of risk mitigation?
Yeah, as I said on the last slide too, it's the same idea to making sure that everything they're adding to these vaults is correct. Like being able to have somebody who can go over all this and have the knowledge to pull all the contract data and ensure there's no malicious code in any of these things, and to ensure that all the risk parameters are adjusted properly. When you're dealing with multiple collateral types at one time and different oracles, things can get crazy. So ensuring that you have a well-researched and a proper risk parameters in place is essential for these. So the executive voting process helps a lot with that.
I got a good question. And so these executive votes are not like roads who are considered to be executives. They are like type of special votes, which then are conducted or like voted by all the MKR token holders. Is that correct?
Yes. So from my understanding, it is more out of the more executive layer of it. So as we saw, what I found really interesting is that throughout the governance process, there are these checks and balances to ensure in which stage the proposal will go ahead. And so this is like the very last stage of this, and how it's implemented could change depending on what is within the smart contract. But yeah, this would be the most like formal type of voting.
Okay. I mean, like, because like the decisions are which are being made, I mean, they will have some impact, which we can see on the slide. So understand.
Sure. And then that's why they also implemented a continuous approval voting model as like another checks and balances. So I can't see Oh, there you go. I can make it down. So in the continuous approval voting, users receive IOU tokens in exchange for their MKR, which is actually locked when they vote. This acts as a secondary governance mechanism, allowing users to continue to vote on governance polls and executive votes without unlocking their MKR. So the continuous approval voting has three main aspects. First is a vote creates a barrier for new proposal, since new proposals need to surpass the voting weight of the last successful proposal. Votes are meant to remain in the system continuously in order to prevent bad proposals from passing easily. And the more votes that there are on the current system, the more secure the system generally is from any rogue proposals. So continuous approval voting systems are actually necessary because at the time, a competing proposal to the system could be introduced. And so this system needs to be continuously monitored and governed, and thus requires a voting construct that reflects on it. And so that's what I also found interesting too, is that it's like a live process. Any questions or any thoughts on this continuous approval model? Do you think it could apply here at Bankless?
Yeah, I think the main difference between us and like Bankless and said us and I didn't even know what I mean. So between Maker and Bankless, it's that we do have mostly like non-smart contract types of decisions. Means like we have that committee or that person who actually will be executing those votes. So I think in that case, like we do have like rather the manual kind of checks to it. Means like we don't need to have system in place who will be kind of checking for it for competing proposals and so on, because we kind of have the community behind, and there is always like a way how to, even if the proposal is up, how to either take it down or vote against, or like make sure that like all the aspects are considered. But in terms of on-chain proposals, which are automatically executed, then that's different. Because when gets voted in, it gets executed, and that it can cause significant issues if it's not, the correct proposal or it's not executed correctly.
Funka, could you imagine this kind of voting concept for, like, I would say, associate important votes, which would have a major influence or impact on Bankless Consulting itself? So, like, it seems to me that you have like flash in the game here, and I mean, it has some value in it. So from which I can tell, just like an imagination.
I'm not sure, Marcus, if I'm following the question.
Okay, so I try it again. So let's imagine, like, so we at Bankless Consulting would have to make some important decisions as well.
Mm-hmm.
So I could imagine that this kind of voting mechanism, like continuous approval, could be beneficial because you would have some skin in the game. For example, with the associate role or representative role or something. And my question would be: do you see the same, or do I make something impossible up here in my mind?
Yeah, I see your point. I think that point you mentioned, like have a skin in a game, it's important. Means like that you can lose if you are like, having some like, let's say like you are trying to like really do something like bad to Bankless Consulting, and like then you like put few people together and you vote on something, and then it will get discovered. You should be losing your status just by the fact that you went against the community, probably. Like in terms of that, like I think it makes sense. I'm not sure if this one will be the best, like technically the best approach, but definitely like the mindset, like that there is always like, if you are voting, you are putting your name, you are putting your stake like into it. Like I think that's generally makes sense. So you are really deciding what makes sense for the community and long term, for the long term success.
Yeah. Thanks.
Yep,
I
I
mean,
think it's a good point.
outside of the continuous approval, I think that the governance facilitator process is really interesting and can apply to Bankless Consulting, right? It's like really to ensure that everybody has developed consensus in something in order for it to actually be an active proposal. So I think that we could apply a lot of learnings within it, like not even in Bankless Consulting and DAO in general. And I just really appreciate the checks and balances behind it, but I'm also curious on the efficiency of or efficacy in regards to the engagement, which I would probably analyze later on. Next slide, please, Pankar. So risk mitigations. And so there are a few risk mitigations that are applied within MakerDAO. They have created a risk team who are MakerDAO community members and who are approved by the Maker token holders who will propose risk constructs to be included in the Maker protocol. And the governance mechanism has two functions: proactive governance and reactive governance. And so proactive governance includes debates, resolution, automated implementation, and their subtypes of votes or timing are like one-off or initialization votes, and intermittent votes and regular votes. And then there's reactive governance, which include like procedural interventions and will change as risk constructs are added to the Maker protocol and changed over time. These actions relate to the performance of a function, such as an oracle, and if an oracle needs to be excluded from the system for some reason, a reactive action needs to be implemented to remove the oracle. Joe, I don't know if you have any thoughts in regards to reactive governance and how it could impact the oracle. Still there.
Yeah,
I need to put you on spot.
Yeah, just so it goes back more about the Oracle pricing. So ensuring that you're not pulling any data from a bad Oracle. So thanks to the way MakerDAO does their Oracle data sourcing, if one Oracle does start to spin off bad information, it can be kicked out through reactive of going through it. So if suddenly one Oracle is flashing through a wrap Bitcoin price of 5,000 less than it should be, they can exclude that from their risk models to ensure nothing happens. But it gives them a way to make sure that they're not getting messed with. Or the problem with oracles, and why I keep harping on it, is it's such an important security function for how the system works that if bad price data starts getting put into the smart contract, things will go bad and things will get liquidated when they shouldn't get liquidated. So, and also someone could take control of price oracle and start manipulating it. And there's just so many risks when it comes to pricing. So this reactive governance allows them to go back through and remove a bad oracle if something happens.
.eth, I think you raised your hand. Did you want to say
I was just
something?
curious. I was just curious if you guys think that it's kind of a risk that the majority of MakerDAO's contracts are using one oracle, like just Chainlink alone. Do you think that creates an attack vector, or do you think that Chainlink is so big right now that it's probably not a concern?
Well, they're using more than just Chainlink. They have multiple oracles feeding into one feed that then gets fed into the contract. So yeah, Chainlink is definitely the predominant one going in there, but there are other oracles also coming in to give backup or give also data to make sure it's all being aggregated into one price.
Do you know what else they use? Out of curiosity, I know that's not part of this.
Yeah, I couldn't tell you on the head. I'm sorry.
Neither could I. Any other questions though?
That was it. Sorry.
If you put it in the if you put it in the governance thread, I'm sure we could find out.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else? Nope. Okay, next slide, please. I think which is also our last slide. So these are the risk parameters controlled by Maker Governance. So each Maker Vault type has its own unique set of risk parameters that enforce usage. The parameters are determined based on the risk profile of the collateral and are directly controlled by the MKR holders through voting. Some of the technical aspects of their risk mitigation is that each Maker Vault has its own unique set of risk parameters that enforce usage, and the parameters are determined based on the risk profile of the collateral and are directly controlled by the MKR holders through voting. A proposal contract is the smart contract that can only be executed once, and when executed, it immediately applies its changes to the internal governance variables of the Maker protocol. And after execution, the proposal contract cannot be reused. And finally, any voter-approved modification to the governance variables of the protocol will likely not take into effect immediately in the future. Rather, they could be delayed by as much as 24 hours if voters choose to activate a governance security module, GSM. The delay would give MKR holders the opportunity to protect the system, and if necessary, against malicious governance proposals. So example, if the proposal alters collateral parameters, contrary to the established monetary policies or the agreed upon, by triggering a shutdown. Thanks, Levi, for coming. And actually, we're at the end of that. So does anybody have any thoughts or questions or just comments in regards to MakerDAO's approach to governance or their risk mitigations? Okay, well, I guess it's just me who got really excited. I don't know. I just find it really interesting, their process.
It is really
but
fascinating.
yeah, I mean, their design is good, but I'd actually really be curious as to like how it works in implementation, and the fact that you're creating a governance house or there's meta governance kind of shows that there could be a disconnect within community engagement and the design. So sometimes like building the best house if people can't live in it might not be the best idea. So I'd actually really be curious where the gaps are within the process.
If you want to be a really active MKR holder and be really active in the governance space, it is a part-time job. It's many hours reading proposals. They're complicated. There's a lot of information going on in all of them. Hence why meta governance is a thing that we're pushing forward and trying to help with, because what we can do that other communities can't. So if you're a community or a DAO is holding a ton of MKR tokens and you don't have no one on your team at the time or the desire to sit there and read through a couple hours a week of proposals and understanding the different parameters that go into them and the choices that your vote makes, we can go in there and give you guys a quick TLDR or an executive summary for a one pager of all the votes, and then really break it down to how it affects your community specifically and what our recommendations would be, as well as give you an opinion after the fact of why you voted the way that we did to help protect or to benefit the protocol or voting on behalf of. So it's just representative democracy, essentially.
Yeah, but and I think you have to be very engaged. Exactly what you just mentioned. Like, it seemed to be a full-time job. On the other hand, it's necessary to make sure that everything goes as it's governed, but really a full-time job.
We decentralized the bank, right? We took an entire bank, how all these people in all these giant buildings all over the world are doing risk modeling, parameters, asset types, collateral types, approving loans, pushing them out, charging fees, origination fees, liquidation fees, actually issuing the DAI to the right wallet address. All of this is done automated. It's absolutely beautiful and insane how the system works. That's why it's so complicated. So you took all those millions of jobs and turned it into smart contracts, but now we're letting not just one person, the CEO, but the entire crowd, everybody who has an interest in this program, decide how to govern it. So there needs to be so many different stopgaps and different steps in the way to make sure that people aren't doing anything malicious, stealing anything, and to make sure the protocol keeps functioning properly. Like, MakerDAO is absolutely beautiful. It's insane how it's constructed. It's elegant, but it's also complicated.
I mean, that's very cool how you both guys have explained this. But I think it's like, if you imagine like a running state or something where you can transfer these things to a state, just imagine that if you go and vote, you don't vote only like for president or something. You really have to actually vote for, I don't know, like a dam which needs to be constructed, and you need to read construction plans and stuff like this. So you need to be an expert to really educatedly vote. On the other, or it's just like lottery. That's like the drawback of this very cool design, right?
Yeah, absolutely. That's also the benefit of what we're trying to build a governance house is the idea of that you can bring in experts. Like I am not a deep into governance. I'm learning a lot from Themes and Bukar about governance, but I've been in DeFi since the start and I've been using Maker for years. And I can bring my DeFi information to the conversations that every vote that happens, we have somebody in the group who has deep knowledge of it and we can all discuss it as a group to ensure we're making the right decisions. Because yeah, it's hard to keep up with all this and have the background knowledge to make these choices.
Very cool.
And we'll see how it goes. I'm very excited about the opportunity, and anyone who wants to, hear more, follow us there on Maker Forum. I think like beginning of next week or the week after, we will start posting kind of our opinions and views on different proposals and how we can help the community. And if you feel like you have something to add to it, like please either comment on it on a forum or like reach out directly. I would like to hear another opinions because we are all learning here, and that's why we have education sessions as well. And I want to make it right.
Thanks for joining, folks. Catch us next week. We're not really quite sure which one we'll be presenting, but we'll be presenting something. And I will converse with Pankar on what that is. But yeah, thanks for joining. Pankar, I think you could stop the recording. And sorry for the background sounds.
No worries. We all need hairdresser at some point. I hope I stop recording or not. So I haven't. So it's still on that recording.